The following is for information purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. All opinions and views expressed by the contributors to this podcast are in a personal capacity only. They do not represent the views of Progressive Equity Research or any other organisation mentioned in this podcast.
Welcome to Tech Talk, hosted by Progressive, our look at the UK small and mid-cap tech market. I'm Ian Robertson. We'll look at interesting news flow and hopefully shed some light on how things really work beneath the hype and possibly debunk some of the myths and legends while we're at it. Whilst the claim that UK investors don't understand tech is a popular trope, it's only a half-truth. The truth is that they can and do understand tech once they have the time and the correct information. If brokers tell investors often enough, they will believe that the rule of 40 is actually a valuation tool, or AIR is the key metric in 2024. But if you give them time and a proper explanation and a wider picture of how the industry works, they can make up their own minds and learn to love and not fear UK small cap tech. But before we say anything else, this is not investment advice, and we don't hold any investments in the companies we are going to talk about. I'm joined on this podcast by the legend that is George O'Connor.
Hi there, everyone. My name is George O'Connor. I recently joined Progressive, working with Ian and the team. I'm 25 years a sell-side analyst and earlier almost a decade at the tech industry analyst IDC. I guess you can conclude I'm either robbing Peter to give to Paul, or in fairness, I'm taking from both of them. Anyway, enough of my flight to fantasy. Over to you, Ian. Ian, how has your week been?
I suppose the main thing over the last week and a bit for me has been trips out to see CML Microsystems out in Essex and Oxford Metrics, not surprisingly, in Oxford. Both of these are innovative tech companies in the UK small cap space, but certainly both of them, has to be said, the future isn't exact. These aren't companies you can predict exactly where they're going, but you can get an idea that the future is big. CML is a semiconductor company, and it's profitable, and it's relatively consistently profitable, certainly by semiconductor industry standards. And its main exposure in terms of investment is to next generation wireless, satellite, 5G broadband, and industrial Internet of Things. And it's important to remember when we talk about 5G here, we're talking about real 5G. At the moment, all we've got is 4.5G working on relatively low frequencies that we've already got for 4G and have been working on for years. What we're talking about with CML is taking up to far greater bandwidth working at gigahertz frequencies. Oxford Metrics is well known for its motion measurement technologies, well established in capturing motion of bodies for gaming, video production, industrial applications, and healthcare, and of course, those virtual reality gaming experiences. It's got huge potential elsewhere, because it's not just about recording movement, it's about measuring the movement, measuring the size of the object that's moving, understanding, predicting the movement. Yes, it all starts to sound a little bit AI-y, but these companies have what Jensen Huang might describe as $0 billion market opportunities. Although, let's face it, these are UK small cap companies, and we'd be pretty happy with opportunities in the tens of millions of dollars. On the more human side of things, the mood was nowhere near as downbeat as you might be expecting from the press or the posts on LinkedIn. What was said was that these are companies that are doing the right thing. They're investing in technologies, understanding where the opportunities might lie, and that's really what the fund managers have got to look for over the next few years. So, George, what have you been up to? What's grabbed your attention?
Love your reference to Jensen, actually. Got me thinking, Ian, we are at peak reporting right now. So we've got numbers flying in, both from the UK and indeed from the US as well. Numbers okay, guidance mooted, shares getting slammed. On a positive for the investor community, it does mean that the US is getting a little bit cheaper from a valuation perspective. But in fairness, to put that in context, US sales multiples 7, 3 in the UK, US EBITDA multiple 24, US 15. That said, though, I've got a little fondness for the Indian IT service companies. We've had firms sitting on just shy of 2 million FTEs, or employees, reporting this week. Their numbers equally okay. Nothing much going on from a share price reaction. The itch I'm trying to scratch with these guys is that if we go down the route of we've got a sort of a fragile economic background. So what's your CIO, your IT buyer going to be thinking about? They're going to be thinking about, I need to buy cheaper stuff. And when in terms of the tech industry, 70% of your op costs are tied into staff, a great way of getting cheaper is to go via the Indian companies. So I've got to say, I've been listening into them, trying to see, is there a message here about share gains, about beating European, US, global, and there isn't. So I'm going to put that theory in the bin and forget about it. Otherwise, for me, in terms of UK reporting, I don't know if you saw, Ian, we had Tiny Build out this week, reporting in line, reiterated guidance. I'm really attracted to this group in terms of the video gamers group. If you invested £1 in these guys as a cohort in January 23, you would now have 48p. Really interesting to see how these companies are rebuilding, given what was essentially a macro upheaval that they've had to contend with. Ian, you've been really busy. You produced some great research on go-to-market for the tech sector. Can you give us a general view, remind us all?
Yes, George. How software companies sell, yeah, it goes back to what we said earlier about UK investors not really getting all the information. You go to a presentation or watch one online, and no one talks about how the company sells in the tech space. They talk about the technology, yes. They talk about the total addressable market, yes. Or the annualized recurring revenue. They'll talk about that endlessly. But the biggest cost item, no. They don't talk about how the company gets its product to market and how much it costs to get it there. It leaves a huge gap in the knowledge about margins, who captures the value, the visibility, the list goes on.
We want to talk about IP, Ian. Sorry.
And as you say, it's all about the IP as far as so many people are concerned. But if you're trying to understand a company, you can try and understand the IP, but there's low-hanging fruit in understanding how it gets to market, surely. The note looks at the two main ways to sell. The first is you do it yourself. The second is you get somebody else to do it. And it's odd when you talk to people about this. As far as the direct side of things are concerned, this is often seen as too aggressive, or maybe as evidence that the market doesn't even exist. And on the indirect side of things, people will find this as a reason to complain because it's seen as dependent upon others. You're giving up margin and visibility. But what really matters is using the right route to market for the product, its market, and for its stage of development, because these things aren't set in stone.
Can I stop you there? You scored a massive scoop on Darktrace, and it's on the screens this morning. One of the companies that you referred to was Darktrace. Can you please peel some skin from the onion on this one and tell us about Darktrace?
Yes, Darktrace, perhaps too strong a way to describe it as the inspiration for the note, but perhaps more a demonstration of the issue. Over the last few years, it's been hit by a number of bear raids. And one of the things that has been pulled out of this research, in inverted commas, is the aggressive selling and the high churn. Possibly a case of playing the man and not the ball, but these issues have certainly had an impact. But when we think about it, should we really be getting too upset about it? Darktrace sells direct, and it sells quite aggressively, and the churn has been higher than many people might have liked. But let's think about why. It's a relatively young company in a growing market. There are a number of players in this field, and some are more established than others. Now, you can use various of these products alongside each other, and they may or may not overlap in their functionalities, whether those functionalities be claimed or real or just promised. Darktrace has to fight for attention. It has to fight for a budget. And to a certain extent, when we look at this industry, the runners are, shall we say, still running in lanes. They haven't come anywhere near around that final bend where they all have to come together and we can start to see who's where and who the winners might be. Darktrace has got a huge number of potential customers, but a relatively small percentage of these will actually respond to any approach. Those that do will require a relatively high contact with the sales guy and with the associated support and implementation. AI plus cybersecurity, it does grab the attention, but you do need a bit more than that to make the actual sale. Although the cyber market is attractive for the resellers in their various forms, it's a far from easy and simple sale for the resellers, even if they do have Darktrace alongside them for the process. So, Darktrace has sold direct. To do this, it must be assertive, and let's face it, we know that that's not going to sit well with a lot of UK investors. Because of all this, we should expect to see some churn. Perhaps more importantly, investors should expect to see churn and a bit of volatility. It goes with young, growing software companies. All this said, Darktrace is now hammering home the story of the change towards partners and channels. Better known by customers and with an evident value case for resellers, direct is now not the only way to go for the company. And with sights set on tens of billions of dollars of revenue, that's the approach they're taking. Given the takeout in the market, the fact that Toma has come in, we won't be able to see these results directly, and only time will tell. But it'd be wrong to look at Darktrace as the example of successful direct selling and say, that's the model, that's how it should be applied. Because direct approaches can be applied elsewhere in very different circumstances, not just in these sort of early stage businesses. And Idox is an excellent example of this. It's got a direct approach too, but for very different reasons. Idox sells software mainly into the public sector. It's got software for building, planning regulations and processes, for social care applications, for alcohol venue licensing. Basically, the building blocks of running local, regional, and national society. They know all the customers in the public sector and for much of the private sector where they're relevant too. And generally speaking, they're selling into the departments rather than the wider authority or body. And they're doing so with the acceptance of the IT department, who know who iDocs are and are happy with the general situation. They understand the customers, their issues, and the way in which they're going to work. And obviously, most customers are already customers in some place across their organization. There are areas within its product set where iDocs has got 60 to 70% market shares. The reputation is well and truly built, and the trust is there too. So there's little reason for iDocs to let anybody else in on this party. It's got the relationships, it's got the business, it's got the margins, and it's very, very high margins, and it's very, very low churn.
So when you think of it, Ian, using the word trust, could that have been where Darktrace slipped up? Did they have that trust? The other side, of course, is price points. iDocs has a bigger sell, if I put it that way.
Yes, it's an interesting issue, this trust and the fact that iDocs puts in the love. But I think you have to look at the nature of the relationships going forward. iDocs is so much part of how these local government, regional government, whatever bodies they are, how they are going to transact, how they're going to work with the public, or in corporate terms, with customers. So the relationship does have to be better for iDocs than it has to be for Darktrace. But I think that is actually one of the things that the UK investors do recognise when they look at companies, that the likes of iDocs have got long-term stickiness because of the way that they put in the love on a direct sales approach, as opposed to Darktrace, which is that knock on the door, if I don't get a response, I'm walking away. But they do that because the number of opportunities, the number of other places they can go is considerably greater with Darktrace than it is with iDocs.
Agreed, actually. Now, your report, is it fair to say your report scored an own goal? Basically, you also talked about Sopheon, who is no longer with us, has already left the party. Nonetheless, really interesting from a sales perspective and go-to-market.
Yes, Sopheon. It's usually a good idea if you're going to write a note to make sure that the company is listed when the note comes out. But actually, because these aren't share price targets, we're just trying to explain what the company does to give people a better understanding of how the industry works. Not too concerned whether it's actually on the market or off the market. Sopheon is a leader in what is described as the management of innovation at a strategic level within enterprises and bodies. It has a fantastic list of customers. It has the likes of LG, it has the US Navy, DuPont, 3M, Hershey, global customer base, which it is selling to directly. It has gone out there over the years and built this reputation, client base, and product set that is world leading. But it's not a huge market. And the company has said, well, actually, there is a greater opportunity there for us to widen out into what can be described more as innovation ops, the more administrative side of product innovation, product management, product life cycles. And it sees an opportunity there in excess of $1 billion of revenues. Now, they've put together a product set through acquisitions and through some in-house development that they think can help them get to this market. They're going to take mainly the direct sales approach.
Do you mind if I take you off topic a little bit as you're going into this subject? Product-led growth. All the tech guys are talking about it.
Yeah. Product-led growth has got a lot of headlines. For some companies, in some applications, it has been extremely successful. And the two classic examples that people will point to is Slack and Atlassian, both of which have listings or achieve sales values in the tens of billions of dollars. Wouldn't it be lovely if we could think of Sopheon going that way? How they have done it is by producing products that users within enterprises or bodies can look at and say, hey, that product there, that solves my little set of problems, my issues that I am facing as Joe within the enterprise. That might solve the problem that my team is facing. And with little or no cost, these guys can take up the product, use it, because of course it's now on the cloud. It's now easy to implement. You don't actually need to go and get the IT department to know what you're doing. They won't see it because you've only logged on to the internet as far as they're concerned. And then through the increased usage by these individuals or teams, you build a viral story for your product. And as time goes by, they will reach out to you, or you can reach out to them and discuss how they're using it or what they're doing. And they become the sort of vanguard, the foot in the door. And that leads to, through a direct sales approach that then follows on, a wider product sale. So product-led growth is a great idea, and it's very exciting as to what it might be able to deliver for Sopheon. But it's not an instant hit. It takes time, and for the UK investor, time is not something they have anymore with regards to Sopheon. It's gone. But you can see, when you think about product-led growth as a way to rapidly, cheaply find a wider customer base, and a customer base that you can build upon, there's a great opportunity there. And time will tell exactly how much of that the UK investor base has missed.
Now, if I sort of make this current again and we get back to Darktrace, that buyer with those same characteristics, i.e. big and ugly PE, paid a 20% premium to buy Darktrace.
Yes. Have we seen an adjustment here? I think the shares have ramped up significant in the previous few months, haven't they? It has to be said for Darktrace. And we have an issue with Darktrace with the UK market as to how much love there ever has been there for it.
That's true. I appreciate Sopheon was a massive premium, and listening to you, I think I'm getting some understanding of why they would pay a hefty premium to sort of knock out somebody else. But the sort of the average is about a mid-30s% premium. So Tomo's coming in cheaply, looked at it from a, what is the premium to the undisturbed price that I need to pay in order to get this one over the line? We've seen lots of M&A in the tech sector. There doesn't seem to be any diminishment either in terms of the opportunities, the willingness of the buyers, or indeed the willingness of the sellers. Do you look optimistically at the outlook for UK tech?
Well, how can I not? We've got plenty of talent. We've got plenty of intellectual property. When we look beyond the market, there's plenty coming through. But it's a question of that break we have at the IPO level. Whether these companies are being sold on pre-IPO, whether when they get through the IPO process, they're giving or getting the right valuation. At a technical level, I am optimistic. I am frustrated, I think, at the IPO level. And probably more so given my history as a hardware analyst for the hardware sector rather than the software sector. But it's not as if when we look out there that we talk about these giants and we talk about things that have come. These things all start as small companies. They don't instantly get created as multi-billion revenue businesses. And that's what I think we have to remember.
Sorry, yes, I have to put my hand up and say that is very true. However, I'm really attracted to your point around CML in terms of the opportunities being afforded by some of the little guys who may be below radars. Both of us have been through many cycles, but one of the ones I recall were the IPOs of Sage and Aviva, illustrating what the UK market does really well. So both Sage and Aviva, of course at the time being CAD Center, were two mid 30 million market cap IPOs. But UK does small really, really well. And it's something that's forgotten about. People don't talk about it, but we are global experts in small tech, getting it, nurturing. The very definition of patient capital is the UK market. So I confess I'm very optimistic around that. Bring in the smaller ones and grow and develop with them.
Yes, thinking back to when I was an investor in CAD Center on the float, when you saw it, you just thought, yeah, this has got something pretty special to it. I'm not quite sure exactly where it's going and exactly how it's going to be. But when we looked at it, you had that immersive experience of walking around. Was it an oil rig or was it a chemicals processing plant?
Both.
But it was a far from straight line. And you just had to look at it and think, well, the long-term story, we know something is out there and it is heading in the right direction. It had the right IP and it was going to make a difference to the industries it was trying to service. And we could see that there were other applications beyond the initial ones.
Ian, it wasn't a straight line. It was not a straight line.
Yes, so much of it seems to come back to this sort of Jensen thing of this $0 billion market opportunity. And that's really how, certainly as a fund manager, perhaps admittedly less so as analyst, you have to look at these things in the longer term.
Great, super duper. What a great thought to leave it on. Optimism in terms of the outlook for UK tech. Optimism from Ian, but most important, I guess the people you were with as well, which are the people who are, of course, investing in these companies. Ian, until next week, have a great week.
Okay, I shall talk to you next week then.
Brought to you by Progressive Equity.